In this video, I'm going to give an overview of section 1.5 on solving equations, and then we'll look at the first rule for solving equations. So our goals for this section are, we'll talk about how we can solve equations that involve polynomials, roots, absolute values. We'll review the quadratic formula, and then we'll talk about when we need to check for extraneous solutions. All right, so our first rule for solving equations says that we want to try to isolate the variable if possible. So let's look at an example. So in this first example, part A, I got this equation. I got this fraction n equals 0, and I'm going to try to isolate the x. So to do that, let's multiply both sides by the denominator, by x plus 4. So I'm going to multiply both sides by that denominator. And when we do that, on the left-hand side, this x plus 4 cancels that x plus 4 in the denominator, and we'll end up with just 2x plus 6 on the left, equals, and then 0 times anything is 0. All right, and now I can move the 6 over. So 2x equals a negative 6. And then dividing by 2, we get that x equals a negative 3. All right. The one thing that we need to be careful about is that when we get our answer, we got to make sure that the denominator is not 0. Otherwise, the answer is what's called extraneous. And extraneous means sometimes when I try to solve an equation, I'll get extra answers that don't actually work when I plug them back in. So in the case of this answer, negative 3, well, it's not going to make this denominator be 0, because what would make that denominator be 0 is negative 4. So that means this answer is going to be okay. So x equals negative 3, that is our answer. All right, let's take a look at another example. All right, part B, I got a slightly different denominator this time, and I'm going to try this problem in two ways. So in this first method, let's do something very similar to what we just did. Let's multiply both sides by that denominator, by this case x plus 3. So multiplying both sides by that denominator. So whatever I do to one side of an equation, I can do to the other side. So I'm multiplying both sides by the same thing. So on the left, that's going to cancel away this x plus 3, and I'll get 2x plus 6. And on the right, 0 times something is just 0. And that's the same equation I had in the previous problem. If I rearrange this, I'll end up getting x equals negative 3. So x equals negative 3. But I got to be careful here, because if I take that answer and I plug it back into our fraction, this answer makes the denominator, it makes our denominator equal 0. So I'm going to put a sad face. We don't like that. That's going to make our fraction undefined. So because of that, I'm going to put a slash through this equal sign. This answer is extraneous. I'm going to abbreviate extraneous, EXTR. So overall, this means I got an answer, but it didn't work when I plugged it in. So overall, that means, well, there are no answers. There is no solution to this equation. All right, so let's talk about a second way I could have solved this. So method 2. So on the numerator, notice that I can factor a 2 out, and that'll leave me with x plus 3 left over, and then over the x plus 3 on the denominator equals 0. So I factor that 2 out of the numerator, and now those x plus 3's cancel out on the top and on the bottom. All right, so that leaves us with 2 equals 0. So 2 equals 0. But that's just impossible. Like 2 does not equal 0. 2 does not equal 0. And the takeaway here is that if you're solving an equation and you end up with something impossible like this happening, like 2 equals 0, well, that means there's no solution. No solution. So we get the same answer this second way. Okay, so I'm going to review a little bit of terminology. So we say no solution when we are talking about equations. Equations, those are things that have an equal sign like this that I'm trying to solve. Okay, so no solution is for equations when there's no answer to them. We say undefined when we are talking about expressions. Expressions are things that I'm trying to simplify. They do not have an equal sign. So things like 1 over 0, that is undefined. This is an expression. All right, let's take a look at another example. All right, so part C, I'm just going to change the number on the right to 2 instead of being a 0. Okay, so, well, let me do it the factoring. Let's factor the thing on the numerator. Let's do it like that. So if I factor out a 2, I'll be left with x plus 3. And then I got that other x plus 3 on the denominator. And this equals 2. And those x plus 3s are going to cancel. So this x plus 3 will cancel with that one. And that leaves us with 2 equals 2. Okay, so this time when I simplified my equation, I just end up with something that's just true. 2 equals 2, that's a true statement. In fact, this is going to be true for all values of x except one value. The only bad value is if there's something that would make the denominator 0 here, and that's -3. That means so for this equation, every value of x except for -3 is going to be an answer.